Hey everyone, welcome back. No, we're not replaying an old video. Today is the day we're going to swap this two-stroke motor over for a different two-stroke motor. But before we get started on that, I hope everybody enjoyed the old Halloween parade video. That was all impromptu. I had no idea that our city even had a Halloween parade. I know they got a Christmas parade, Thanksgiving parade. I do believe there's a Labor Day parade. I know there's a St. Patrick's Day parade. But I had no idea that we had a Halloween parade, so that was a first for me. A little something different, a little something to break up the video monotony, shall we say. All right, if you caught my, which turned into a rant video about the two-cycle motors before the Halloween video, that is, today is the day we swapped this motor over. They just plain old quit on the customer. The FedEx man finally showed up at his door, and we have our replacement motor. All we need out of this kit is that little engine right there. The customer can take the rest of the kit home, which is not a bad idea because it gives you a lot of extra parts. God forbid you break one, you got a box in the other room. We'll hypothetically say your poor bicycle blows over when you're parked at the store in a heavy wind and breaks the gas valve off the gas tank. Like I said, just hypothetical. You have one extra at home, so you don't have to wait for days for the FedEx man to bring you a new tank. And that part's kind of handy. So I'm going to take a moment and remove this engine from the bike. I probably should have did it to save myself a little time earlier before the engine arrived. But as you can see, I did not. Figured I might as well just do it all in one big fail swoop. I do have one little tidbit rant about the two cycles, and I've seen it happen, and I've had it happen to me before, especially on eBay and Amazon, if you're purchasing a motor from either of those facilities. Sometimes they show you a picture of an engine that you think you're getting, and then when it arrives, that's not the exact engine you're getting. And I know you're thinking to yourself, but oh, Mr. Wizard, what do you mean? Well, I'll tell you. If you'll notice, this engine is the two-part cylinder and head. It is two parts. It is not all one piece. That is why you have the four studs that poke up here to tighten it down and sandwich it all together to make your cylinder one big piece, leak-free, and ready to roll. Well, as I unboxed this, I had noticed, find a place to put my trusty chunk of foam, this here motor right here, as you can see through the plastic, is a one-piece cylinder engine. You can see through the plastic, this one is one big piece. The head and the cylinder are all one casting, and it mounts to the case of the engine down there. Now, when this first happened to me, I was actually going to send it back because that's not what you showed me in the photo. But for some reason, I thought, well, you know, even eBay and Amazon have the 30-day return policy. So let's give it a shot, see how these little motors do. And I'll have to admit, every one of these little suckers that I did that were the one-piece cylinder, the motor does have a, I don't know, fair to middling amount of power. And they ran just fine. The only complaint I really have of them, which are two tiny complaints, I guess. One, in the future, if I have a problem, and I think it might be cylinder related, on this particular bike, I can pull the four nuts off of the head, slide the head off, and be able to look down inside the cylinder and see if there's any scratches or flakes or galling or hot spots or what have you. The downside of this one, you can't take just the head off of it because it's all one piece. So if your bike is in a tight fit, your engine is on the bicycle that has a tight fit, and you can't slide the entire cylinder up the whole length of itself, then you have to remove the engine if you think there's a cylinder issue. That way you can check and see. But other than that, like I said, the little engines seem to run fine. So if you are a person that got one of these, don't fret. It seems to be a good little motor. I'm not saying that at all, that it's a bad little motor. They do have plenty of horsepower, work just fine. My only other small complaint is, I don't know, I would say through the years, had to think about that for a second. I've never had one go bad, or at least on me. But I noticed online you can't get the one-piece cylinder head like this one. And at the very least, if you're going to rebuild it, you can change it over to the two parts. You can get the kit. It comes with the exhaust studs, nuts, washers, cylinder, gasket, and head. So you can change it over to that style. Heaven forbid if you have a problem and or you get so many miles in it, it's completely wore out. But this style I could never find. I did like once or twice, but it wasn't in an abundant supply. They wouldn't have them. They'd be out of stock, or pretty much they just wiped them out and didn't even offer this whole one cylinder setup. But other than that, just a little food for thought. Not really beating up on the old 2-cycle motor today. Just want to get this one changed out and put on here to see if that one does a much better job than this one did for the customer. Before I just walk over and bolt this engine on right out of the plastic bag, cardboard box, foam case, if you will, I always do a little prep work. Now, some folks out there will completely tear the motors down, check on the quality, and then reassemble the motor and then install it on the bike. I am not going that deep. I'm just not. It's pointless for me. Back when I used to have 5 or 8 of these things done a week, that was just counterintuitive. So I didn't go that far. But what I do every time, every bike, is check all the nuts and bolts. And in this case, it's all bolts on this bike. These are the 2 bolts that hold your case together. This bolt and that bolt. There's one underneath right there. Always check those. Check your clutch cover. I always check my intake bolts because sometimes they're not completely snug. I don't know how many times I can count that these come from the factory, and I'll put the wrench on one of these bolts and get a half a turn, quarter turn, sometimes even a whole turn or 2. That means the bolt's loose, my case isn't properly sealed, or there's a good chance my case isn't properly sealed. And after I mount it to the bicycle and then start it up, that's when I find out I have a problem or an air leak, and then I got to chase it. This way it hopefully eliminates any chance of that happening to you. So I will check all of those. These 2 right here that take care of the top of my case. This I don't have to worry about because I have to remove it to put the chain on. And that way I know there's no leakage, no air leakage, or anything of that nature to give me a problem when I'm first trying to start it up. Another friendly suggestion I have. Now, a 2-cycle motor, for those of you who don't know, gets its lubrication from the 2-cycle oil you mix in the gas. That is why you have to mix the oil and the gas. Now, until the engine gets running, there's a good chance that it doesn't have any oil on the bearings, cylinder wall, piston, rings, etc. So we like to refer to that as running dry, which is not good for any steel to be on steel running dry. So what I personally do to help the cylinder anyway is I will put a few drops of oil, 2 or 3 or 4. I'm using just regular old 30 weight in this, but 2-cycle oil would be best. And then I will roll the motor around so that the oil will hopefully run around the cylinder and piston. That way when I take it out and I'm pedaling it and I engage the clutch and the piston starts going up and down in the cylinder, that it is not dry and galls my cylinder right from the start and my bike doesn't even run. I have had it happen. I have seen others that have had that happen, all because none of us at the time put a few drops of oil in the old cylinder. You trust that the factory would do that, but in my experience, I don't trust that the factory does any of that, so I do it myself to make sure it is properly lubed to make my job a lot easier. All right, having said that, going to take a station identification break to get that motor removed off that bike. I hope those friendly tips on engine prep, at least when your engine is brand new, help someone out. That's why I threw it in there. It's something I learned to do over the years, because sometimes little motors come from the factory, bolts aren't completely tight, then you got an air leak or an oil leak sweating out of it. It's just an unnecessary problem that you may or may not have coming up on you. So simple enough to take a couple minutes to check it out. Same thing with a little lubrication on the cylinder. Naturally, I can't get down to the bottom without disassembling the engine. The factory generally does put at least, at the very minimal, a little film of oil in there, but you don't know how long the motor has been sitting on a shelf waiting to be sold, so it's nice for a couple fresh drops of oil so the cylinder has a little lubrication to go up and down before the juices start flowing, which would be the 2-cycle oil and gas. All right, enough about that. As you can see, got this bad fella swapped over. While I was at it, I went over the entire bike, check all the nuts and bolts. Why not? It is a good idea after you've ridden your bike for the first time, be it a tank full, half a tank, whatever. All the brand new parts meet each other, and sometimes they make their own little adjustments, if you will. Like wheel bearings are a good example. Everything's all tight and snug now after you come back and got a few miles on it. Sometimes you need to readjust the wheel bearings because they have never ridden before, and now they're finding a spot in their little home to ride, and they're getting comfortable, if you will. So you just snug them back up, give them a once over, and head off any problems you might have in the future, and get all the wear out of your bike that you paid for. Okay, I am going to take this out, and we are going to find out in unison if this new engine runs better at all, and hopefully if it does the A and B of running great and right off the bat, that it lasts a long time for the customer. So let's get to it. Let's see if all the fruits of our labor and a little engine prep paid off. Well, what can I say? It was a success. Had to pedal at about one bike length with the choke on. We tried to start up, chugged a little bit, set my choke down, at least an eighth of an inch or a quarter of an inch so it gets a little air through the carburetor. Repeated the pedaling and clutch release step, and here she sits. So hopefully, as I said the first time, but you never know with the little 2-stroke motors, he gets another 100,000 miles out of it. Problem 3, little one-cylinder. Well, they're one cylinder, but the cylinder that is all one and not 2-part cylinder seems to be working out all right. Like I said, I've had good luck with those little motors in the past. My only beef was there weren't a lot of one-piece cylinder replacement parts for the cylinder anyway out there at the time I started dabbling with them from time to time. All right, well, I'm going to call the customer, let them come pick up their bike so they can get riding, because it is a lovely warm fall day, by coincidence. And he'll probably want to get out and ride around a little bit. I'm going to let this heat up and give it a one more go over with the engine parts, and yep, send it home. As usual, until our next exciting video. See ya.